I'm Dane Rose, and in part 2, or the bonus section of my critique of Byron Katie and the work, we'll look at a couple things I didn't cover in part 1, and then we'll do a little bit of the work together. So one of the stories that I resonated with was Byron Katie's son, and this was in the context of Byron talking about how she loved being criticized, and so here you are, Byron. Loved being criticized and could learn and grow and all that. So her son pointed out to her that she had been unfair, that she had always been biased towards the other son. She didn't see it. And he gave examples, and the other son backed the first son up, said, yeah, Mom, you did favor me here and here and here. So she got it. She acknowledged the impact of a lifetime of kind of unspoken bias. And her son burst into tears and hugged her, and their relationship completely changed. It's much deeper. It's remained much deeper. So a wonderful relationship emerged because Byron accepted criticism, acknowledged it, and her son felt seen and felt heard. So it sounds to me like the single biggest change that I've ever heard Byron talk about with her children, right? But it wasn't doing the work, meaning she didn't ask her son to question his story about the unfairness. She asked herself to validate his story and thus embrace him. Now, this is, I think, touches on one of the unspoken paradoxes of, the work, which basically is that this is what we all want. Every single one of us. I would love my mother to say, when I was screaming at your father and ignoring your feelings and you're cowering there, you became terrified, you changed your personality, and I've been dismissing it my entire life. I've told you to get on with it. I've never been there. I've never gone into that feeling with you. I've never acknowledged any of my impact. And it's created this kind of distant rift where basically your greatest pain in life was caused by this, this, and this. And I'm so committed to not feeling any of it that I completely dismiss who you've become, right? So then I could fall into the arms of my mother and feel the way Byron Katie's son does, right? But that's not real. That's crazy talk, right? If you do the work with Byron, that's crazy talk. Your mother's never going to do this, this, and this. It's crazy, right? But that's the thing that completely changes the relationship with her son from then on out. Not the work. A mother that actually apologizes and owns her impact. And that's what we all want. A mother who apologizes and owns our impact. And it's true that 99% of us are not going to get it. But it is a fast path to healing. It just took Byron Katie 30 minutes or so to deeply heal by acknowledging that wound. So we all want that. Wouldn't that be great? If our parents, if our abuser, would do that. And so, but Byron is not facilitating mothers doing that or, people obtaining that from their mother. She's just saying, this is what my son got, but you're not going to get it, do the work. So there's a little bit of a tension there. Now, I touched on this briefly, but I didn't finish my thought in part one. Byron Katie says the body is an illusion, right? It's no big deal. It's an illusion. It's a creation of mind. And her whole body changed after waking up into that illusion, right? And so she lost weight and her eyes changed and all this thing, right? But she suffered 2 excruciating periods of physical pain. First, when she needed, I think, her whole eye pupils needed to be replaced with surgery, and were like needles in the eye and couldn't see, etc., for some time before that. And another time, her balls of her feet, just completely painful to walk on. Another time, her legs fell asleep and just stopped functioning for an hour. And in each of these cases, right, Byron is saying, well, that's the way, this is what is. I love what is, meaning I'm in excruciating pain. My body is a reflection of my mind. It's an illusion, and I love it. But the question is, why? What is the expression of excruciating pain when you love everything? Because Byron may enjoy years of blindness with excruciating pain, but I don't. And I don't think most other people do either. So, that's a question. First of all, like, why is that showing up? The second, thing was, Byron's ambivalence about getting a surgery that would remove excruciating pain, right? No big deal to me one way or another. She had another whole system where she nearly died. In conventional language, she says, in her mind, she never nearly died. But, her doctor measured her kidneys shutting down, her liver shutting down, and, they finally resuscitated her. But why are these illusionary body parts, the eyes, the feet, and the whole stomach collapsing, going into pain, when you love everything that is? Right? And I touched briefly on the paradox of Byron loving everything that is and saying hundreds of times, all wars should be on paper, but they're not. That's not what is. The wars are out there all the time. And, right? And that believing your thoughts and suffering because of them is crazy, right? Do the work. When 99.9% of people, 99.9% of the time, are not doing the work and are crazy, right? So if Byron was facilitating someone who said that 99.9% of the time things shouldn't be happening the way they're happening, and are crazy, she would say, is that true, right? But she's putting forth, this war with reality that 99.9% of people, 99.9% of the time, are crazy. They're not perfect, and they're not doing the work. They're crazy. And that the wars that should be happening on paper are not. Now this, maybe that's where the war is, in the body. I don't know, right? It seems to suggest that if you can love what is, you don't have a war, and your body repeatedly shutting down in various portions in massive amounts of pain sounds kind of like a war. And what is war? Massive amounts of pain for different people. So, when asked, would she like a different body without pain? No, she says she loves her body. But the question is why? Why would a woman devote herself to reducing suffering in herself I'm going to come to this prison. I'm going to go to this school because I want to reduce suffering in myself. If there's one part of me caught in sleep, I want to reduce it. So I'm going to fly over here. I'm going to go here. But there's your body screaming in pain. Nah, that's fine. That's fine. I'm not going to look at the suffering in my own body. I'm going to look at all the me's out there because I don't want you to suffer. Right? So what's with travel to San Quentin to reduce suffering in Byron Katie, because she says it's all her, in someone in San Quentin? But who cares if I'm in 10 out of 10 pain in my own body, which is also Byron Katie, right? So a little bit of a gap there. Another interesting paradox. Byron Katie's purse is stolen, and she's delighted. She imagines the people enjoying her cell phone, spending money on her credit cards, the nice, beautiful, Gucci purse is wonderful, right? Now, there's no problem, right? Her purse is stolen. They're going to really love my lipstick. They're going to, right? She's delighted, right? Her purse is stolen, all of the. Okay, that makes sense with loving what is. But then she calls the police. Why? Right? But then she calls the police and reports the purse as stolen and cancels the credit cards. Right? So what happened to enjoying them spending the money and doing this? Now you're enjoying them going to jail? Like, if the police find the people who she was just imagining enjoying the credit cards, if they find them, and they're convicted of stealing a purse, they go to jail. And what does she do now? Imagine them having a wonderful time in jail, enjoying the fact that they stole her purse and went to jail and didn't get to spend any money because she canceled the credit cards? Right? So that's that paradox. That's a little snippet of it. But the question I have is, right, why call the police if you're in love with the loss of the purse? Because that sounds exactly like what everyone else does. Oh my gosh, my purse is missing. I want my purse back. Right? If you don't want your purse back, it's a wonderful thing, and you let go. But if you want it back, right, then you have an attachment in some way to having it back. And presumably, if you want it back, you feel better when you get it back versus not, right? And now her resolution of this paradox is because that is the way of it. But is that a satisfying explanation? Right? Bullshit. That is your way of it, right? Byron Katie's way is to imagine someone spending first of all, her way is to lose her purse, right? Then her way is to enjoy losing her purse. And then her way is to call the police and report the purse as stolen and cancel her credit cards, instead of letting them go to town on her credit cards because, as she said, when she gave her house to someone who asked for it, of course I gave it to them because it was obviously there. They're me, right? They needed it, so of course it's my house, right? But then in another section, she says, well, I follow the voice. I follow the voice. So I give to some homeless people. I don't give any money to other homeless people. Why? I follow the voice. So which voice, right? We get into, there's lots of people following voices, but, and I guess if you have experience for years following a particular voice where most of the time things work out well, then you get $100, homeless person, you get nothing. I'm following my voice. or the voice, right? So there's a little bit of, so I give it obviously because it was obviously theirs, because they're me, because they asked. I gave it because it was obvious, because they asked. A homeless person asked, no, you don't get anything. You don't get anything. You don't get anything. Here, you get something. Didn't they also ask, right? So there's some lots of, complexity not unpacked in the gap between these various stories. So we then look at another gap where she's in, I think, San Quentin, and a guy is complaining about his stepfather who introduced him to heroin, right? I'm angry at my stepfather because he introduced me to heroin, i.e. his stepfather was doing heroin. His stepfather offered him heroin. He accepted, and he went to jail because he was doing heroin, and he wanted to blame the fact that he was in jail on his stepfather introducing him to heroin, right? So, but Byron Katie's having none of it. No. You introduced yourself. He didn't cram heroin down your mouth, right? I don't know if there's a point, right, in the age gap where Byron Katie would acknowledge feeding a 5-year-old heroin, a 1-year-old. 1-year-old cries for some milk. Dad gives her 1-year-old some heroin. Did Dad introduce the 1-year-old to heroin? What about injecting it into the fetus? You received it into your body, right? You received it. You're a heroin addict because you chose to take it into your body, right? I'm not sure if there's any point at all on that particular thread where Byron would say, yeah, the parent did introduce the kid to heroin. But nonetheless, in this example, teenage boy introduced to heroin by his stepfather. No. It's completely his choice. He wanted to, like every boy wants to bond with, an older male figure, and the way to bond was to junk up. And so, but no. You did this. Do the crime, do the time. She asks him, did you know when your stepfather did you know it was illegal? Yeah, well, you did the crime, do the time. That's the way of it, right? That's the way of it. But if we flip to what Byron Katie says about herself, no, she doesn't think thoughts. She doesn't make choices. She doesn't live. It, right? It's the way of it, right? She just is thought. She is lived, right? So the teenage boy thinks, let's do heroin to bond with my stepfather, and well, obviously you should go to jail for that. Don't blame the jails, don't blame your father, don't blame the system for criminalizing, addictive No, none of that, right? This is the best thing that could possibly happen, is this kid is introduced to heroin. We'll get to that a little bit later. But, here's a little bit. So I'm thought, I am lived. I don't do any of this. I don't even know what it is, and But you chose this and this and this. So what if she instead said to the boy, right? Well, you were thought, right? The culture says, bond with your parents by copying them. That's what every kid does, is copy their parents at a certain age. She acknowledges that. So here he copied his parents, but no, this has nothing to do with the parents. You chose to copy the parents, but I'm lived, I'm thought. So a little bit of a gap there that is not really explored. But now we get to perhaps the most self-referential thought with minimal explanation. Now, those of you involved in Christianity or any fundamentalist religion will be familiar with self-referential thinking, right? God is the creator of all things, right? God is the creator of all things, okay? God said that I am the only God. God wrote this book, and the book says that God created all things. And so he did because he did, and that's the way it is, right? This is God, this is the book of God, and the book of God says this is God, and this is the book of God. And so that's the way it is, right? It's I am because I am because I am because I am, right? It's not a great hypothesis. Well, Byron takes this to the extreme. How do I know that the best thing for you was to be raped as a child? Because that's reality, right? How do I know that you should have gotten fired and your wife should have slept with the boss, because that's what happened. It's obvious, right? To Katie, this is 100% obvious. But to anyone with a little objectivity, you see that this is based on a belief that the universe is a friendly place, that everything is happening because as part of God's plan, and that God's plan is the very best plan that could possibly happen. Now, if you accept those lenses, right, and just layer them on top of each other, and you hear, my daughter was raped today by a gang and developed AIDS. Wonderful, wonderful. The universe is a friendly place. Obviously, this was very necessary for some. I mean, we won't go into that, but clearly. And it's so very necessary. And it was the best thing that could happen. It was the only thing, and it was God's doing. And those familiar with corruption in various levels of the church, the Catholic Church was recently, kind of acknowledged in various ways. You can watch the movie Mea Culpa Maxima, or if you like a New Age version of that, watch the movie Holy Hell, in which a male spiritual leader molests other male community members and keeps it secret and charges them money and all that, right? But basically, it's, and it's perfectly wonderful, it's all part of God's plan, that the Catholic priests go out in their sermon and say, you'll go to hell, you'll be burned alive. God hates homosexuals. Now come into my belfry. Right? Now you heard all that. God's going to murder you and kill you and hates homosexuals. You're going to burn for eternity. You got all that? Okay, now suck my dick. Suck my dick. Do what the priest said. The priest is close to God. Suck my dick. You're going to burn in hell. Right? This has created a nightmare that, frankly, American boys, who are shamed for deep emotion, who are shamed for not knowing things, right? As a man in America, you are shamed for having deep feelings. You are shamed for being effeminate. You are shamed for being homosexual, at least in my generation. And you are subject to trauma, hatred, and attack from 10,000 images and thoughts and news stories and jokes on endless movies and this and that, the other, right? Right? Nobody, your father's going to disown you. You're ashamed. Now go to the priest, be a man, go to the priest and suck my dick. And it gets worse because the parents were bought off by the church and wouldn't believe or honor their kid and punish them for telling the truth. And of course, they go to the church and they learn that you should always tell the truth. We're going to punish you for telling the truth, right? So it's just such a, and these men, right? It's just such a difficult thing to unravel. And some of these boys go on to become juvenile offenders. In fact, I believe 90% of the young men on death row who were tried as adults because of the extremities of their crimes were sexually molested by an older male and given the entire cult narrative to carry. Like, carry this, you're a shit, you're worthless, you're worse than worthless, you're no son of mine. Carry all that meaning around homosexuality, and then let's have, an older man, probably the only one who took any interest in you in America, because, right, we don't really have adult older men to draw on in America, and so your most intimate, meaningful moment is likely to be the older homosexual who's wanting to have sex with you. So you deal with all that, right? And then the secrecy and what do I don't know what to feel. And these kids just lash the fuck out, right? Raping, stealing, murdering, because they're so angry at being left to deal with all this stuff in their head downloaded by their cult. And, of course, this is part of God's plan. And this is the seething hypocrisy that, a priest deals with, when, the cardinal who covers up the molestation and moves the pedophiles to one place to another to avoid controversy, but doesn't actually expel them from the church or protect the children, right? Thankfully, we have a new pope in that's equally infallible, but that's doing that. This is their stories, which, on some level you could apply that. Is it kind? No. This is, there's a strong statistical correlation to that. And this is the best that could possibly be happening. It's the only thing that could be happening because it is happening, right? That's the only evidence for that, is because it is, right? It's a little bit, right? We're definitely into the territory of blind faith, which leads to a lot of bitterness, a lot of cynicism. When you see the priest dipping into the collection box, when you see the priest drinking, when you see the priest having sex with the congregation, when you see the priest molesting young boys, but, it's all for the best, it's all part of God's plan, right? Right, so what's the difference? What's the difference between Byron Katie's "it's all part of the divine plan" and your cardinal telling you to shut up about what's happening in church and all the hypocrisy and all the illegal activity and all the craziness? You're going to go to hell, now suck my dick. Like, just shut up about it. Don't think, don't ask questions, just shut up about it. What's the difference between, I kind of thought that being beaten black and blue every day of my life wasn't a good idea, right? I kind of thought that my depression and rage and lack of secure emotional, I kind of thought it had something to do with that, and that all that pain was problematic. No, right? This is the divine plan. So that is definitely a weak argument, right? It's a good hypothesis, right? It's certainly, but not necessarily for victims of severe abuse who are already blaming themselves, right? It's all my fault that I was raped and this and that. So, I haven't seen that particular area of work, right? I like Robert Bly, and his wife worked a lot with children, and basically the young girls did not recover from molestation and incest until the father was found guilty in court. So basically they said that the little girl is going to blame herself. It's all my fault. No. But if the judge pronounces the father guilty in court and sends him off, she will get that it wasn't her fault, and she's going to move on, right? But Byron Katie would be there saying, no, you have a story about that. And actually, I think there has been one woman talking about molestation that dealt with that. But it's definitely, an area that would be nice if, Byron Katie looks at it, because it is, right? It's happening. That's how I know it's for the best. Right? So definitely a big leap of faith there, but, that's what it is. Now, I noticed, with my parents, the first thing I noticed was, and this kind of ties in a little bit with, that experience Byron Katie's son had when, she acknowledged that she was biased towards him. The first thing that I noticed was that my siblings became healthy, happy, well-adjusted siblings when I babysat them, and that they turned into juvenile delinquents within 5 minutes of my parents returning home. So that was a very interesting 180-degree thing to notice. And here I'm referencing, Byron Katie's acknowledgement of the impact of her presence on her dying mother versus the other children, right? So she would be with her dying mother, and her dying mother would feel it's fine, be having a good time. Then the children would come in, or the other siblings would come in, projecting that this was a great tragedy and being this. And her mother would slip into the whole drama of, yes, I'm dying and this. And then she'd go back to being happy when she was alone with Katie. Right? Well, that's obviously the way of it. But, I looked at that dynamic and said, something's off here. Something is off if all of my siblings become dysfunctional in the presence of my parents, and they all become happy, well-adjusted, constructive, happy kids when they're with me. So I confronted my father, who had as much intellectual ability as I do, and I said, Michael, I just want you to know what's happening. I want you to know why it's happening, because I analyzed it. And you are, in effect, systematically training my siblings, I was the eldest of 5, to be depressed, dysfunctional, unregulated, all this. And he kind of turned white. He looked around. He clearly was not happy to hear any of this. He obviously grasped it on some level. And his response was to completely avoid me from this point on, right? So clearly not interested in any truth about that. Now, I've shared this, with other people, and who all loved to just smear this, oh, your parents are so wonderful. Well, wait a minute. I mean, what do you mean by wonderful? And is it wonderful to train your kids to be delinquent and then shame and blame them for being so? Is that what you mean by wonderful parents? It doesn't seem very wonderful to me, right? So when I then saw basically the whole cult go white and, avoided, and don't tell me about it. It's all roses. It's all roses. I thought something's very wrong with my parents, and something's wrong with the entire cult that doesn't want to know about a single instance of childhood abuse and doesn't want to do anything about it. And my siblings are depressed, lonely, manic depressive, bipolar, until now, right? So I saw that shifting, like they could be going in this wonderful, graceful direction very easily, that's their nature, but under the influence, the necessity of my parents, they shifted to become more and more dysfunctional, and they were doing it at an age where they forgot who they were in their nature, and so they identified with their dysfunction, and it got cemented in. Now, I think this is the biggest crime that a parent can do, to induce unnatural, dysfunctional behavior in their child at a young age, then shame and blame them for it so they identify with it, and then be a martyr like, It's like, you goddamn motherfucking cowards. You can't even look at the truth, right? You'd rather, kill your siblings? One of them suicide? Yeah, kill them, right? I don't want to deal with my feelings. I don't want to deal with this. I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to look that I don't want. I want to read I want to read Byron Katie's book. See, you should love us the way we are, right? Right. You create your own reality. Why are you creating us as these kinds of parents, right? This bullshit, right? So this is all, of course, for the best part of the grand plan, right? But then why does Byron make such an effort to actually be a decent parent with her own children and encourage everyone else to do the same, right? But it's good that our parents abused us, right? So there's something that doesn't gel in all of that, right? So I watched this in one area after another area after another area, and my judgment call is that's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. That's wrong. And it's wrong that my siblings are punished for the wrongs of the parent because they're too cowardly, they're too narcissistic, etc., to do it themselves. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. Now, we'll move. So that's where I went with that as an adolescent, and obviously deeper into this, and developing my own identity as a wronged or invisible critic, which is kind of my own way of forming an identity, etc. I couldn't figure out what else to make with that. I certainly didn't look at that and say, I'm so glad that my siblings will be suffering for the rest of their life because they're too frightened of the disapproval of my parents because they've abandoned and threatened to abandon them enough that they're terrified of abandonment, right? That's the first crime. And then having terrified them of abandonment, they've said, you've got to be fucking delinquent in order to feel secure in this relationship. Okay, I'll be delinquent here, I'll be delinquent there. It's like, okay, good. All right, you got it? You're delinquent. Oh my gosh, we're so burdened by these delinquent kids, right? Now take all our shame, all our guilt and all that, right? You got it all, right? Okay, now we'll live happily ever after in denial of any of this, and you can just suffer for the rest of your lives, right? And every time I try and bring this to my siblings' attention, oh, no, it's not like, oh, we can't say that to mom. She'll be upset. She'll be upset if she was asked to be, a vaguely adult, responsible person. She'll feel bad. If we acknowledge that we noticed her cruelty, she'll feel bad, right? It's like, we can't have mom feeling bad. Like, let's just kill the kids. And deny the whole thing ever went on, right? And isn't she beautiful? And look at all the spiritual Louise Hay books she reads, right? So seething bitterness and rage, right? And so this is where the work is helping me. I think that mostly covers the addendum, of my, my critique. But the story, because I looked at my parents, they're not worse than average, right? So if my parents are narcissistic, incompetent, sociopathic, committed to abusing their children, committed to not acknowledging any of the abuse and then blaming their kids for their own incompetence, well, then we're just talking about parents, I'd say my parents are average from the look of it. I mean, if I met my parents on the street and just looked at the data points I could gather meeting them on the street, I would say they're, average or above average. So what does that mean? It means that the majority of parents are doing this in one way or another. The majority of parents don't want to deal with it, and the majority of parents would rather their kids die. Right? I was suicidal by age 14, in part because I'm dealing with this. Right? What do you do when no one wants to do what Byron did with her son and acknowledge the truth? What do you do? When you see it happening day after day. Now, of course, Byron said, well, that's your story. But what's the point of a story? What's the point of a story? It's to develop a predictive understanding of what's probable, right? The story of gravity, it's not, when you say the word gravity, that's not gravity. That's a sound. That's a symbol of writing, which is a symbol of ideas and pictures, which is a symbol of more writing, which helps us predict that the pen falls, right? It's a useful story. That's all science is it's in the business of creating stories that predict the future most of the time. And that's why science is the single most popular paradigm of the world. Because if you want to make money and you look at the Bible and you lose money every single time you look at the Bible, and you want to make money and you see that your quant computer algorithm makes money 80% of the time, you believe the story that a quant computer will help you make money because it does 80% of the time, and you make lots of money. So fuck the Bible. I want my religion to be a quant computer. For very good reason. That's what is. That is what is. It's not the old paradigm. It's this paradigm, right? The paradigm of predictive correlations and probabilities, which is the business of science, is the dominant paradigm of the day. That's what is, right? But that in Byron Katie's, that's the old way, right? Well, it's not that old, a couple hundred years. And that brings me to, I guess, one final critique, which is Byron loves to be neutral. I love it when people come. I love it when people go. I love it when people say yes. I love it when people say no. But she doesn't seem to love it when close friends or spiritual teachers won't honor the truth. In other words, Byron knows, she absolutely knows that all suffering is caused when people believe their thoughts. She knows that. And she knows, because she's had her vision, that all thoughts are an illusion. None of them are real, and they're all lies. She knows it, right? So she asks you, but she knows. She says, is it true? But she knows it's not true, right? And she wants to release the suffering of all beings and blah, 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 right? She'll travel to the end of the world. If there's one person, she'll go all the way over there just to do this, right? Right? Not literally, right? Because she could be doing the work all the time and doing this workshops and all the time, but theoretically, she will travel to the end of the world to do that. Now, so one of her spiritual friends, she was criticizing her basically, without realizing that that wasn't her theme basically. She was saying, I talked with this spiritual person and this and that, the other, and they couldn't see. They said it was true, and they said they knew it was true. They wouldn't let go. Their spiritual teacher and this and this. Byron Katie was clearly not amused by the fact that a popular spiritual teacher that she knew refused to do the work and refused to see what Byron Katie knew all along, which is that it's not true, right? So, that's, obviously in Byron Katie's world, she feels more happy when people know that it's not true. And she says, oh, you're very courageous and good job and this and that and the other. You ask the average person, is it true what you believe? And they say no. Or they say, yes, it's true, right? Byron Katie doesn't say that those people are courageous, happy, bold. They want to know the truth, right? But if you really know that all words are lies, if you really know that, you've got to know that the word no is as much a lie as the word yes. In fact, when I've done the work, at times, there is a higher resonance to saying yes. So I found that interesting, right? Having noticed very powerful results in the work when I say, no, it isn't true, or can I absolutely no. There's times then I've said, it's absolutely true. That's just what pops up. And I know it's true. I'm thinking, really? Well, that's odd. And it feels luminous, right? And of course, if you're pushing a system, if you believe like it's got to be always no because it's all illusion, you've got to find that it's not true, or you feel like you're an inadequate, you're not growing as much, you're not courageous, you're not, fitting in with, Byron Katie and reaching the higher levels, right? But of course, if you know that all words are nonsense, they're all lies, then a no is as good as a yes is as good as a no. What the freedom is letting go of the attachment, right? The attachment to it. And but Byron seems attached. She steps back constantly, but she seems, I would say, 20% attached to having people say, no, it's not true. Good. She doesn't, she will go through the motions, but she's interested in people realizing that their thoughts are not true. Which is, of course, also not true. You could just as easily say that they are true, right? It's all made up in the mind. So it's true, it's not true. What's the deal? The freedom comes in the liquidity in the middle when you can move. You're not trapped in this polarity, or the other polarity. And generally, if you believe something tightly, believing the opposite loosens the grip, I would say. So it's a good movement. A turnaround is a good exercise, regardless. If you believe that police are good, right, then loosen it up. Look at the ways that police are bad. If you believe that police are bad, loosen it up. Look at the ways police are good, right? It creates lubrication. It creates flow. It expands your world when you can have paradox, when you can have both. So, just something to note. So, let's just pause a moment. Criticizing Byron Katie, praising Byron Katie, it's equal. Loving Byron Katie, hating Byron Katie, equal. Byron Katie is wise, Byron Katie is an idiot, equal, right? In other words, if you believe what I say, you'll suffer. And if you just let it go, and that's why I do these critiques, is it's easier to let it go.